Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Voices of Celebration. We haven't had one in a while, and this is a particularly unique one. I'm very excited to welcome back a former client and dear friend of mine, Clint Powell. Welcome, Clint.
Hello, how are you?
I am very good. Clint and I were just chatting offline. Him and I worked together a little bit through his divorce and how time flies when you're having fun.
Uh-huh.
So, this is an 8 years later podcast episode about post-divorce life. 8 years, Clint.
It's you said when you've been having fun. Yeah, some of it's been fun and some of it's been very challenging. But yeah, and thank you for your patience because I spent about 20 minutes of pre-recording preaching, so I apologize.
Not at all. So, before we just dive into some nice, juicy conversations, can you give our listeners a little bit of backstory, what happened 8 years ago?
Yeah, I was married for going on, I think it was 19 years, going on 20 years. We dated a year or two before that. And I think my story would resonate with a lot of people. It was a good marriage. A lot of times we had struggles. And then the last 2 or 3 years, retrospect, looking back, you can see a lot more clearly than you can amongst the trees. I can see the forest now a little better. And the last couple of years, I think she had already kind of checked out. And again, I don't talk bad about her. I don't talk bad about the mother of my kids. It's just reality. I think she was unhappy, and I had a lot to do with that, and she had a lot to do with that. And got a conversation one night, and we were looking at therapy, and she said, "I don't think therapy's for us. I don't think I've." Yeah, she goes, It's. I've not loved you in a while, and it's time for us to roll. And it was a hard pill to swallow, but again, she had already gone through the grieving process. She had spent nights crying that I didn't know about. She'd probably tried to fix the marriage when I wasn't. I mean, so to put it off on her is not really fair, but that's where I got to that point. So I went from having a family of five of us in a house with two dogs and a goldfish to a couple months later, every other week, I was a week without kids because we had joint custody. So it was a big change and transition in my life. And like it is with everybody's, whether it's it goes easy or it goes hard. It's change is difficult, especially when it involves our feelings and our hearts and our identity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really reached out pretty early on. Can you just share a little bit about what that was about?
Yeah, I think it was actually I started within about a day or two because in the situation I was in, there was about a month left of school, and we didn't want to tell the kids because we didn't want them to end the year on a bad note. I couldn't tell my family really, so I was for 5 or 6 weeks. It was basically I was just living with this. And again, she had already got to that point. And so I started literally getting on the treadmill or working out, which I've done my whole life, but I started listening to podcasts. I started reading. I kind of determined pretty quick that I did not want to be the reason that my kids didn't heal either. I learned real fast how important co-parenting was. And I'm not saying I knew it. I just knew that there was a right way to go through it and a wrong way to go through it. And I'd watched a bunch of my friends go through it the wrong way.
Hmm.
And so I started listening to podcasts, started reading as much as possible. And I think 5 or 6 days in, that by the end of that week, that conversation was on a Monday. So within a week, I'd found one of your podcasts where you were actually a guest on someone else's podcast. And I love the dialogue. And anybody out there that's gone through this will know what I'm saying. Once I found 5 or 6 different podcasts that were feeding me the positive, you can make it through the day tidbits.
Yeah.
That's all I listened to. I mean, literally, anytime I had downtime, I was filling my brain with something other than woe is me and this sucks. And that's what I started doing. I think I reached out to you within a couple of weeks. You were a coach. That's how I learned the difference between a coach and a therapist. I also reached out to a local therapist. So I was doing double whammy for about 4 weeks because I wanted to heal as fast as possible, start the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and there's so much wisdom in that because, like you said, you saw so many of your friends go through it and do it poorly. And it's just, you're drowning, right? You're drowning in emotion and confusion and grief and fear and everything else. And to be in the ocean drowning alone when there are lifeguards around just seems foolish.
Yeah, and I'm not going to tell you I did it all right. I had several nights where when the kids weren't home, I didn't go home. I went and drank, And I had a couple buddies would meet me. They surprisingly, they knew where I was going to be, and they would get me home. And they finally, about after 2 or 3 months, they finally told me, they said, "Hey, you're better than this. Stop it." And I stopped it. They were very good accountability partners. They were people that I still love to this day. And I didn't want to sleep my way through the problem with other people. At some point in time, the beast was going to have to be dealt with.
Yeah.
So I just kind of grabbed a hold of it as early as possible.
So one last question about back then, like when you think back, what are the one, two, three key things that you remember most that you either learned or changes that you made? What were those things?
A couple, and I just also want to preface everything I say moving forward is healing and learning it is different than putting it into practice. It's much more difficult because I struggle with that some now in the relationship I'm in, learning to not drag my past baggage into current things. That's an issue for all of us. But a couple of things that you said, and then some other stuff that I just learned. One is this too shall pass, is what my mom used to say, but you called it waves. And the emotional waves of all the stuff you just described a minute ago, of the fear, the unknown, the anxiety, identity being crushed, they're going to be big and they're going to last for a while. But if I could learn to sit in it and not fight them and just say, it's okay to feel this way right now, it's going to pass.
Mm.
Sometimes it was 30 minutes, sometimes it was an hour, sometimes it was 2 hours. But a week later, it was 30 minutes instead of an hour. And then a month or two later. And I just had to learn to ride that out. And the other thing that I have a bad inner voice that I started doing based off your advice was asking myself, is what I'm thinking true right now? Right? It's this going to be this way forever. Now, hold on a second. What else in my life has been the same forever? Nothing, zero. So what are the odds this is going to break that trend? Right? She's doing this. I need to do that. Their kids are going to be this way. And that question, is this real? Is it factual? Help me a bunch. And then the other thing is, I can't control things. It sounds cliche, and I wish I had some tactical. You probably have more tactical experience in it, but focusing on the very thing that day I can control, as small as it could be, whether it's making my bed, whether it's making the phone call I don't want to make, going outside in the sunshine when I don't feel like it. Those things started empowering me a little bit. So those are the three. And then not listening to my friends all the time. That's the other thing. Because my friends were like, "Hey, you need to go out with Barbara." I don't want to go out with Barbara. Let's go have a drink. I don't want to go I mean, I do, but sometimes your friends have your best. They love you, but they may not know what's best. So those are the four things I would say. Be careful of listening to advice if your gut says this may not be the best
Yeah.
thing for me.
Yeah, and it's so true. They do love you and they are
Yeah,
your best interest. That doesn't mean what they're suggesting is best for you.
that's
So I
right. Yeah.
love that. So one of the things we talked about diving into today is going through something like divorce, and especially doing it with therapy and coaching. It's such fertile soil to evaluate and to grow and to develop new skills. And yet the divorce is over. And then life happens, right? And so we've got 8 years to take a look at with you. And so, how does that show up, and what changes in business and raising kids and going out and dating new people? And so, I'm going to leave the dating piece for last because it's going from the intimate relationship that didn't work into new intimate relationships. We know that's where a lot of issues will come up. But I
Mhm.
want to even look at what issues come up in business. I find that a lot of my clients who go through a divorce also go through a business transition or a job or a career transition. So can you share a little bit about, I know you're like a lifetime businessman, what happened during and after the divorce in terms of your business and the pivots that have happened on that front?
Well, half of my income right now comes from doing business coaching and sales coaching because, I can tell you what not to do. I'm not really great at telling you what to do, but I can ask the questions to help you figure out, no, don't touch the stove, it's hot stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things that had happened to me is I had, especially last 3 or 4 years of that marriage, taken away the personal side, just the business component. I had gotten in the habit of making some decisions because I had 3 or 4 employees, and it was working, right? It was working. And money, cash flow, reputation, a lot of things can cover up bad decisions. If I'm making enough money, I can spackle holes in the wall. I can plug the hole in the boat. in different time in different ways. And the reason I bring that up is because once the divorce happened and my brain got out of that echo chamber and my relationship changed with my wife at the time, and now my finances are changing, it started revealing some bad decisions I'd been making in the last year of my marriage because I was so focused on just surviving. For the last couple of years, I just was trying to make sure everybody went to bed in peace and nobody was mad, and I was being a good father and as much as a good husband as I could be, failing as much as I was. And so the change happened, and it's not just a change in a relationship. It jerks the rug out from under you completely, and it reveals all of your bad decisions.
Right.
So I shut my business down about a year after the divorce because I realized, first, I wasn't making good decisions. Second, I had very little energy. I was trying to focus on kids, and it revealed a lot of decisions I had been making now that I use as lessons. And so I shut that business down. And I'll tell you what it did for me after I shut the business down, and it affected me everywhere in life, is I became a very minimalist. I now want less. I want less to me equals more. So I don't need to own the business with 5 employees or 100 employees anymore. I don't need to make this much money anymore and have these toys. And I don't need that. I want as little drama in my life as possible, which means I'm going to be content with far, far less. And that goes in the business world too. I make enough to pay my bills, save up a little bit, make sure that everybody's taken care of as much as possible. But my drive for that is gone. I don't need that anymore. And before I did. And I think the divorce changed that a lot.
Well, that's such an interesting pivot. How has that impacted your fulfillment with your work?
Well, it's kind of weird. It's an ego blow at first. Somebody said something to me about 3 years after the divorce, or 2 or 3 years after I closed the company down. I used to be at every networking event. I had a table at all the local chambers. I would get asked to speak at chambers. I was doing probably 30 speaking engagements a year. And I went to a function. I didn't go out much. I still don't go out a lot. People are amazed when I show up at stuff. And I went to something and nobody, I mean, it was like, I didn't know anybody. I was like, why is nobody coming up and going, hey, Clint? It was a little bit of an ego blow. But the biggest change came, I'll be honest with you. I had lived under so much stress without realizing it that when the stress was gone, I don't want to go back down that road. And and now, whether it's dating or money or kids, when I run into stress, it triggers me a little bit and I just step away. I'm like, never mind. I'm good.
So, it's a really interesting thing. I want to comment on something you said earlier, which is that how your business kind of suffered. I think that most people don't realize that when you're going through that level of emotional chaos and conflict and uncertainty and fear, it doesn't matter how much of a type A person or a successful person you've been. And it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a small business entrepreneur or whatever, you're not on your A game. And it is absolutely bound to impact. It's like you're only human. There's only so much one can process at a given time. And then to talk about this. Okay, so there was all of this pressure, right? The marriage wasn't going well. The business was doing okay, but bad decisions behind closed doors. So now I'm hearing that you feel the chaos. It's almost like you have this, how do I want to say this? Like your sensitivity to it has been heightened, which sounds like a really good thing. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it is. It's again, I'll restate it. When the water recedes from the shoreline and you see what's left, that's what happened with the business, right? All stuff started getting cleared up real quick. And I was like, well, I don't like the stuff left on the beach, man. This is not good. I've not made some great decisions, no matter what kind of frame of mind I'm in. And so now that I'm removed from it, yes, I am very sensitive to drama and chaos, and it is good up until the point of a lot of times it causes me personally to retreat. And again, some tactical retreating is good in battle and warfare. If that is my knee jerk reaction everywhere, I think sometimes I miss out on opportunities still. And it can affect you in different areas if your gut instinct is to, oh, that's going to be like it was last time.
Right.
Right. I'm going to go ahead and bail on this one.
Right. Right. So it's the yin and yang of the radar. The radar is not bad. That's good.
Right.
It's like chaos, conflict, drama. great to have the radar. But what I'm hearing you say is you're either strategically removing yourself or you're unconsciously in that kind of knee-jerk fear or discomfort removing yourself, and one works better than the other.
Yeah, and here's the problem when you've gone through coaching or therapy or you've tried to heal or become a business coach, and I'm using my mistakes to help people not make the same mistakes. I know what I'm doing. It's not, there's
There's no
subconscious on it.
unconscious.
No, it is all, and I will feel myself, Clint, you feel like you're running away. Yes, I'm running away. Don't run away. Face this fear. You shut up. That inner voice. And to be fair, there are times that I push through, but I think we all struggle with that. Once you touch the stove, like I said, and it's hot, you're very careful to make sure the stove's not hot before you reach out again.
And well, I want to pivot over to your kids. I would like, because everyone listening are podcasters and such a big part of your new business is podcasting, can you just take a minute and share with our listeners that part of your business? So you do the business coaching, but you also have, you entertain all of us with a lot of different podcasts. So can you just take a minute or two and share?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Let me do that. Yeah, I've started a podcast about 7 years ago called During the Break Podcast. I was in radio sales and for a long time, and I had a business radio show for a while. What I heard from all the people on air, they would always say, "Man, I wish you guys could hear what we were talking about during the break." And so that's where the idea came from. It's going on 6 or 7 years, and we've got about 1,800 episodes in. And then I've got one called Dayfire, and there's a gentleman that owns a company called Rock Creek. He sold it. It's a big company, and we talk about adventure around outdoors, around the world, crazy people doing crazy things. Of, by, and for the people. That one is about politics and the Constitution. I have the Crime Cast, former Chattanooga Police Chief David Roddy and SWAT Commander, and we talk about crime from all around the country, Southeast especially. And then I have the 5 to 9 business coaching. You can find that at failureavoidancecoach.com, because I can't tell you what to do, but what not to do. And I also have one called Vital Health Radio download. And there's a gentleman that owns the biggest health store in the in the Southeast Tennessee, named Ed Jones, the Holistic Navigator. And he and I talk about a holistic approach to health. So thank you for letting me plug those. But those are my podcasts, and we're about 2,700 episodes total in.
And if you can't tell from his accent, Clint is from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Chattanooga. Throw that A in there. Don't say Chattanooga. No, you got to say Chattanooga. It's a in
Chattanooga.
There.
Well,
Chattanooga.
You had an opinion when I lived in Florida. You told me I wasn't a real Southerner then.
You weren't. And I knew. I think you'll remember too. I even said, "We'll see if you can make it through the summers," and it could not. You strategically retreated back
That's right. Back to New York.
Back to New York.
Exactly.
Those summers are tough down here now.
Which is where I live now. So I'm absolutely not a Southerner. I failed. I am a failed Southerner attempt.
It's a different humidity down here, and the bugs are just a little different.
Oh my God, they're huge.
Yes,
they're beastly.
They are.
You've heard the saying, April showers bring May flowers. If co-parenting has been difficult this year due to your ex's alcohol abuse, you need SoberLink. How it works is simple. Your co-parent will test at scheduled times. Built-in facial recognition will confirm their identity. Tampa sensors will flag any attempts to cheat, and results will get sent instantly to your phone, so you know that your kids are with a sober parent. Lay the groundwork for brighter days ahead. Visit soberlink.com/JBD to learn more and get $50 off your device. So when you got your divorce, you had an 11 and a 16-year-old that you were parenting part-time, and then you had a stepson who was 26. So one of the things Clint and I tend to chat about is raising emerging adults. And so, I'm curious, with everything that you said you learned through the divorce, how do you feel like that transition impacted you as a parent?
I really never thought I would get married. So I didn't get married till I was almost 30. I thought I was just going to be single the rest of my life. I was having a good time and everything was happy, hunky dory. So when I got married and inherited a stepson who was 6 or 7 at the time, or 7 and 8, I can't remember. I think it was 7. And then we had kids of our own. It changed everything. My identity became husband and father. And then the husband part got taken away. And I already kind of try to pride myself on being a good dad as much as possible. I screwed up a bunch, but that's kind of was my priority. So one of the things that I did, I think I mentioned earlier, was I immediately realized that, wait a minute, I may struggle going through this really bad, but I can't have an 11-year-old girl getting ready to go through the most crucial part in her development of becoming a young woman and her have no relationship with dad or watch mom and dad fight or try to find a way to hide from the new definition of family. Same thing with the 16-year-old boy getting ready to go into manhood. I needed to see him. How does a man, and not speaking to the women's side of it, how does a man handle hard things? How does a guy handle emotional stuff and keep his masculinity intact? And I didn't want to instill in him that the best way to do that, son, is to go sleep with a bunch of people, become a drunk, start fighting again, and become the stereotypical dude. I didn't want that. And I didn't want my ex wife to have to carry the burden of a guy who can't handle his part of a hard, difficult change.
Mm.
And so, all that's a long way around the barn to say, I think it made me more focused on if they're okay first, I'll take care of me, and then that feeds them being okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember from the very beginning of us meeting together how child-centric you were. Like that was your number one priority. I mean, you needed to heal, but like everything else was about the kids and navigating those early, tender, difficult conversations with the just ex and the
Yeah.
kids, and always making your children the priority. And so the last piece of it, so I think that when I look at my clients and I talk to clients from the past and I look at my own life, it's like everything I've learned then comes into every other aspect of my life. But then with so many of our lessons, I feel like we can have amnesia at times. So it's like what I knew and I got really good at with negotiating with my ex, then I step into parenting or dating, and my baggage boils to the top, and my lessons maybe sink a little bit or they fade into the background, at least temporarily. And so you said that you've done some dating. And I would love to talk about how is it an intimate relationship with you now? So your marriage fell apart, you rebuilt, you're developing a great relationship with your kids, and now you're going out and you're actually engaging in a relationship with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
What are the beautiful things that you grew through the divorce, and what are the areas where you're seeing old patterns maybe temporarily arise?
Yeah, I said this to her the other day. I didn't know she was out there. I didn't know there was somebody like her out there. I really like her company. She is my favorite person to be around right now. I love being around her. She's very patient. She's very secure. She doesn't need me. I technically don't need her. We're choosing each other, which is that's a compliment, right? When you find someone you respect and you see that they're choosing you, that's a compliment. That means a lot. And so again, I've said how patient she is. The thing that I struggle with is I'm very aware of trying not to hand off my baggage to other people. And so there's a fine line between, and again, some of what I talk about is strictly for dudes. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be emotional. And if that's your case, that's fine. I disagree. I think most men, if they were honest, are completely okay with being emotional and vulnerable with one woman. Now, if you're out there and you're being a player, I got very little respect for you. Go for it. If that's how you define manhood, rock on. See you on the other side. I don't have to shake your hand. I don't have to like it, right? Same if you're the same guy that thinks you got to beat up everybody in the room. If those are the only two things we're doing to judge how tough we are, so you're getting the seasoning on the meal of masculinity, in my opinion. So, with that being said, the fact that I like being around her and I'm trying to be vulnerable with her and emotional with her, I'm also very aware of walking that fine line of I don't want to hand her, I don't want to vomit on her all of this emotional stuff that I may get triggered on from the past relationship that didn't work, right? It's this feels like it did last time. We're not talking, so this means this. And going back to, is this real in my brain? Am I dealing with the reality, or am I dealing with that inner voice that was created through 3 to 5 years of just survival? And the only reason I've not had to deal with that even though I've healed as much as possible, it's because I've never put it to the test. I think I compared it to learning karate online or learning boxing, watching videos. I can sit in my room all day long and mimic the videos and tell everybody I know the moves. Yes, I can talk about it on podcasts. Now go out and go into a contest and go into the boxing ring. And a lot of times that does not translate well, right? So now it's an opportunity to me to see if what I've learned can I put in practice. And a lot of it's working great, but I'm not going to lie to you. It is a lot of the things that pop up have nothing to do with her
Right.
and all to do with me,
Right.
and me struggling with anxiety of how much of this do I share and ask help with, and how much of this is Clint Big Boy, you just got to eat and move through. Don't retreat, don't pull away,
Right.
and push through, because then you walk the fine line. Am I pushing through? Is that right? And it's just that insecurity. And I know women aren't good with it either, but dudes just hate insecurity. Being insecure is just a very hard place for us to live.
There's
But
there's
it
like so
causes it.
much judgment around it, right? Like the whole masculine and being insecure aren't supposed to like reside in the same space, but humans are insecure at times.
Well, and especially again, I go back to how I define masculinity in a relationship. And this is going to sound weird. I'm okay if the world rejects me. I I really don't care. If my family doesn't and she doesn't and my friends don't, guys will put it into that. And it's a lot of responsibility. And I'm not telling you it's healthy. This may be where you get off the air and you say, Clint, I need to get a couple hours. You need a couple hours of coaching. But I don't need the affirmations from the world. But once a guy has opened himself up to someone, he does need their affirmation. And if I don't get it from that, then we start reading it into our own brains, because most of the time, guys just don't hand out emotion. We hand out our bodies, right? I know dudes handing out their body like a Tic Tacs, but we don't hand out our hearts much.
Right.
And so when we do, we would like for that to be taken care of.
Yeah.
But what happens is, again, I'll say it for the third or fourth time, is once that's not been handled correctly and we go somewhere else and try it again, if we don't realize that a lot of that new relationship is going to be me dealing with trusting and getting past it, if I'm going to hand off something to her that's not her business and job to handle, and it's not fair to her, and it will ruin the relationship.
Well, I think that, it's interesting because I think no matter how much healing we do, everyone comes into a new relationship with childhood wounds and with wounds of past experiences. And so the question is, even if I've grown, even if I grew through my divorce and now I'm in a new intimate relationship, we talk about 4 areas in coaching that most of the problem isn't out there, it's between our ears. And so when we coach, the 4 kind of mental blocks that cause so many of these problems are how we interpret things, right? So if my dad cheated on my mom and then I cheated on my spouse and my spouse cheated on me, I have a lens that is going to not go away so easily, or assumptions. If it happened before, it's going to happen again, or limiting beliefs. When people do A, B, and C, they're dangerous, they're bad, they're whatever. And then, so those are 3. And then the 4th one, which we all struggle with, which is, in my opinion, the most plugged into our heart and our emotions, is the inner critic, right? You talked about that offline. It's like the conversations that happen between my ears.
I would punch somebody in the mouth for talking to me the way I talk to myself. I'm like, who are you to talk to me that way, sir? And then meanwhile, I can't get away from it half the time. I have to. But again, a lot of the stuff I've learned. And so 2 quick things, if you don't mind. First, I think I had never been through a divorce. So part of what I'm doing is still learning. Sometimes we think healing means we figured it out. And healing doesn't mean we figured it out. It just means we're willing to try to go put it into practice again, at least in my world. So healing doesn't mean I'm not going to make the same mistakes. I'm a Christian. I still have to ask forgiveness for doing the same sins all the time. Healing a lot of times is I may make the same mistake. It's just not going to be to the same degree, or it's not going to last quite as long. The other thing, when I'm listening to you talk, and I came up with just the word while I'm sitting here. It is the word abandonment. We do not want to be abandoned by the people we've given permission to abandon us, right? And once that's happened, I don't want to hand that fear off to her because
Okay.
that's not her job to deal with.
Right.
She's got her own stuff. And it is the healing process doesn't mean any of this, any of us have figured it out. It just means we are aware of how screwed up we can be,
Yeah.
at least in my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I learned on abandonment when I was doing my own work for many years was that if I abandon myself, I will attract people who abandon me. It's so powerful and it's so true. And so in my world now of high conflict divorce, and I know yours wasn't, every divorce is conflict, but not that really severe high conflict. Those of us who end up in these high conflict marriages are basically falling in love with someone who's not emotionally available in one way or another. And we've come from trauma, childhood trauma of abandonment. And so what do we do? We're people pleasers, we're codependent. It's like, what else can I do? Can I do more for you? Will I get 5% if I give you 200%? And it's this whole abandonment. And then I have clients who they're like, why does this keep happening to me over and over again? And it's scary. And I think I hear you saying that this is what you're doing with yourself is I am going to commit to myself. I'm going to notice what's going on. I am going to commit to doing my healing. I'm going to commit to being my best. I'm not going to give away something I don't want to give away. And when you commit to yourself, the chances of finding someone else who's healthy enough to commit to themselves allows for the diminishing of that abandonment.
I'm writing something down if you don't mind, because I want to bring it up. It is so I have learned something about prayer. So I try to be a better Christian, and trust me, people listening are going to go, really? Yeah, everybody knows I try. We all try. I hope. I fell at it pretty bad, but one of the things I've learned in the last year or two is if I take the same problem to God, and I'll make this all make sense in a second, but if I take the same problem to God over and over again, we can again read into it. God doesn't hear, God doesn't care, God's never going to answer, all these things. I heard a good podcast the other day that said when we take it to God, he hears us the first time. So asking God for help with something the first time, and I'm just saying this is how it works for me, and it seems to be working in my brain, is fine. After that, every time I think about it, I need to go ahead and say thank you for answering the prayer, because I've gone from fear to praise, from fear to gratitude. And just because I don't have the answer yet, it took God 21 days to get it to Daniel. It just because I don't have the answer yet doesn't mean it ain't coming.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean I have to like it, but I go from saying, God, I need help with this. And then every time after that, I'm trying to train my brain to say, as soon as I think it, go, thank you for the answer. I know it's coming. And then the other thing I learned to do is I quit praying for not just her and my kids or my ex-wife. I try to pray for all those folks every day, my family and everything. I quit praying that be with them and help me and help us. I just said, hey, God, make me the dude I'm supposed to be, make them the person they're supposed to be. And then that way we'll just show up into whatever role is required of us in the way we're supposed to be. And if that's with me, great. If that's not with me, that's great. I just need God to make people who they're supposed to be and quit telling him what the miracle is supposed to look like.
Well, and that's what they say, right? About praying is like, okay, I have my to-do list for you, God. Would you please? And it's interesting that you say that. A piece of my story, Clint, is after my divorce was 3.5 years, and I guess like 2.5 years in, where I was clawing and begging for custody and enough money to survive and all of this. I don't remember why it happened. I just remember one day I woke up and I thought my only prayer to God is going to be your will in your timing. Please just give me the faith and the patience and the strength to abide. And my divorce began to unfold at that time so
Mm.
quickly. And it was that surrender. And that's what I hear in what you're saying is if I could surrender to what I think I should be, what I think should be right, what I think should be happening in this relationship or in my business or with my kids, if I can surrender all of that and thank in advance, right? The gratitude, that brings a whole different energy and way of dealing to the table.
100%. Yeah. And, you know, I'm a big believer on track record. I don't have a great track record of doing things my way and it working out really well. So I probably, sometimes I do that. I'm like, God, it would really be good if you could do this. And sometimes he whispers back, could you just let me do it once, man? I mean, is it all right if you just take your hand off the wheel? Because I'm looking back, Bubba, and it seems like every time you've taken the wheel, you've hit the turn going into the wall, going into turn three. And anyway, so again, surrender for all of us is hard. For a guy, I can only speak from that perspective. It's extremely hard because we're fixers and we like to make things better.
Yeah.
And we think we know how to do it all the time, and we don't.
So your kids now are 19 and 25. They're, as we were describing, emerging adults.
My stepson's 35, so he's in there
Stepson's-
full. Yeah, he's full adulthood now. He's doing very, very, very well. So.
Yeah. And how is that for you to be parenting? Your daughter's out of the house, right?
Yeah, she's in college, so she comes and goes. She's 2 hours away from me, so she'll
Yeah.
be coming home next weekend.
So single dad raising young adults, how is that experience for you?
It's good, and all of us know this. Whether you have an intact marriage or a single, and you're single doing it, it's almost like every year with a child brings a completely different world because they are emerging and change is coming so fast. Puberty brings on one set of changes, new friends and schools. And so it's never really boring. It goes by super fast. And we were talking about before the podcast, the days go slow and the years go fast. But I love it. And again, once you start becoming aware of your own screw ups and your own insecurities and the things that you start watching your kids make decisions and immediately where they're making that decision, what emotional or what mental state they're making that decision from. And it's really hard to sit back and not go, let me tell you why you're doing that. Don't do it. I got to pull back on that.
I believe I brought it up because I think that raising emerging adults is a practice in surrender.
Yeah.
Like you see it, I like my kids, we have a great relationship, so they'll come and they'll talk to me. And one of the key things that I learned early on is as they're sharing all of this stuff going on in their life, it's like, what do you need from me? Do you want me to just listen? Would you like me to share my thoughts and opinions? And it's really important, right? Because if we just fix it, they'll stop coming to us. And that, so with my son recently, he's good on, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I just wanted to like process it. And I'm like, okay, great, you have it. You know where I am. And meanwhile, biting my tongue until it's bloody because I'm like, I want to say that thing. But
Yeah.
no, I'm going to respect that you're an adult. You can make your own decisions and learn from your own mistakes. And I would rather you always come and talk to me and me bite my tongue than you get frustrated with me and not come and share anymore.
I will say that surprisingly for me, I've gotten that has gotten more difficult for me. Usually it's more difficult when they're younger. Usually you want to tell them, hey, you're 16, da, 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 da. I was actually okay with that. Or maybe I've never been okay with it. About 6 months ago, I started realizing I give my opinion too much when they bring up problems. And I don't know if I'm any better than I was 6 months ago, but I do realize that I'm not as good they still come to me and I'm still a decent sounding board, but I probably could do a little better of just sitting and going, that's interesting. That's one way to respond, buddy. That is one way to handle it.
Exactly.
That is an option. Feel free to put the fork in the light socket. That is one way to turn the lights off in the house. Yes, sir. Yes, you can do that. Yes.
So one of the reasons I love chatting with you, and I've been on Clint's podcast a bunch, is he's both self-deprecating and very funny, as well as always has very interesting conversations. So I really appreciate you coming and sharing. Do you have any last words of wisdom or advice for our listeners? And then I'd like you to just run through those podcasts again, and so people know where they can keep listening to you.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaways are if you're going through something right now, remember it's a wave. Ask yourself if it's real. Get some professional help, whether you decide it's a therapist or a coach. This too shall pass. You don't feel like it. I promise it does. And that meant nothing to me in the moment, except that somebody was saying it and it stuck in the back of my brain. The other thing is, I don't care if it's 2 years, 5 years, 8 years post divorce. Once you start putting yourself out there, I'm not talking about going out. I mean, vulnerably out there with someone, it is a test. And I'm trying right now not to retreat and pull back. And it's nature, that's natural. But again, this too shall pass. Ask yourself, is it true? And I've been very lucky to find somebody we can have some good conversations with. But just because you're air quote healed doesn't mean that you don't forget that the scars are there. And it's still a learning process for me to mature in that way. And then, yeah, you can find, if you just Google Clint Powell podcast, you can find all of them. Dayfire, The Crime Cast, Of, By, and For the People, The Failure Avoidance Coach, and During the Break, and Vital Health Radio. You can find them all out there. And I appreciate you allowing me on the platform again to talk about this kind of stuff too, because I think, and I'll give one last thing. If you're a guy out there going through this, I'm telling you right now, put the ego aside. You don't have to cry at every coaching session, even though I did a couple of them. That's okay. Your identity's been torn apart. Go get help. Go find somebody to talk some stuff through. Put the ego aside. The faster you get to getting into the meat of it, face the beast in the basement. Your kids will be happier for it. You'll be happier for it. And it helps you redefine what masculinity is. And don't be such an egomaniac.
Beautiful. Well, I really enjoy speaking with you. You bring a lot of wisdom and experience to the table, and we will have each of the podcasts in the show notes. So if you are interested and you didn't write them all down, just go to the show notes and there'll be a hot link to each one of them. Clint, thank you so much for joining me. I wish you the very best in your new relationship with your kids, emerging kids, with your business and all of your podcasts. You're a treasure.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your help in being part of this too. I'm glad I found you. You're one of the main reasons that helped me get my brain straight. And so you've helped a bunch of people, but personally, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And we'll be back again real soon with another episode of Voices of Celebration. Until then, you take care. You've been listening to our podcast, Getting Educated, regulating your emotional reactions, and it's been really helpful. Yet you know you could do better, be better, and you're wanting and needing more support. That's where our coaching service is a game changer. We're here for you when you need us the most, ensuring you have all the tools and resources at your fingertips, guiding and supporting you to be more effective. Our free rapid relief call helps you gain a broader perspective, commit to your best next steps, and determine what coaching support is right for you. Visit rapidreliefcall.com to book your call today.